Today on The Divide, all adults in our state are now eligible for a vaccine.
We've got vaccine coming on like crazy.
But some are still hesitant to roll up their sleeves.
Let's be really clear, there were no shortcuts made.
Plus, longtime Senator Patty Murray has a challenger for the 2022 election. Meet the veterans advocate running on the Republican ticket.
I will make Washington, D.C. work for all of Washington state.
Also, as the nation waits for an outcome in the murder trial of a former Minneapolis police officer, other deadly police shootings show the divisive and often unequal debate around use of force. That and more as we attempt to bridge the divide. Hello and welcome to The Divide. Busy show. We got to get to it today. All adults in our state now eligible for a COVID vaccine.
We've got vaccine coming on like crazy. We now have about half of our adults in the state of Washington have received at least one dose. We've had tremendous success in our vaccine program. 32% of Washingtonians over the age 18 have already been fully vaccinated.
The state, however, hoping to get that number closer to 70%, a threshold we're told will help us get back to life as normal. But some are still hesitant to get a vaccine. I posted a poll to Twitter that about 1,000 of you responded to. My question was, if you are hesitant to get a COVID vaccine, what would sway you? 30% said nothing, not a thing. 15% said if they needed one to get travel, they'd consider getting it. But the biggest portion of you who took our poll said you wanted there to be more time to study possible side effects. Let's read what a couple of you wrote. Yvonne wrote, I don't think enough research has been done. Kevin said, what's the point of getting a vaccine if we're still told we need to mask up and social distance and society is closed? Totally pointless. At KitsapDad on Twitter wrote, waiting for FDA to approve it through the full vetting process, just like all the other vaccines I have taken in my life. So let me start this segment by saying I am getting a vaccine. I look forward to it very much. I'm not going to tell any of you what you should do. You're all adults. But I did want to take this opportunity to chat with an expert about the issue of vaccine hesitancy and some of the things stopping folks from rolling up their sleeves. Dr. Scott Lindquist is the state's epidemiologist.
There are some people that strongly don't believe in vaccines. So I'm not sure just giving them more information is going to change their mind. I think we have to respect where people are on their choices of vaccine. But I think a large part of the population is unclear on some of the recommendations for this vaccine. Remember, COVID is only a year old. This is a virus that we have a very limited resource and experience with. So to have a vaccine come out pretty quickly is hard for people to really understand.
Yeah, and I put a poll, a highly non-scientific poll up on social media, and I asked people who were still vaccine hesitant what was driving that decision. And the majority of them said that they just don't think enough research had been done or enough time to really thoroughly research the vaccine. What would you say to that concern?
Yeah, I think the issue is this was a very fast track for a vaccine, but let's be really clear, there were no shortcuts made. It was done very quickly, but all the safety and efficacy studies were done, and in a very diverse population so that we would have better understanding of how this applied to everyone. Suppose you were Native American or a person of color. So I'm actually quite impressed that we didn't shortcut any steps, but they were able to do vaccine safety and efficacy in a wide variety of folks that receive it. Now we get more experience as we give millions of doses out. I mean, you've heard this concern about J&J vaccine. After almost 7 million doses were given, 6 people, so very few had these concerning associations, and now so that slows it down so we can actually look and see, yeah, there's an association, but is it cause and effect? So I'm actually very confident, and I'm happy that we're being so transparent that if there are any concerns, we look into them and put a pause on things. So I think that should make people comfortable in the fact of knowing this isn't a rush job. It isn't cutting corners. We are doing this very transparently.
On the J&J vaccine quickly, as you mentioned, we're talking about a handful
Yeah.
of cases involving this out of millions.
Yep.
When I'm looking through the lens of, talking about people who are hesitant to take the vaccine, especially if that hesitancy comes from concerns about what could happen or side effects, is it just going to add fuel to the fire to put a pause on a vaccine over 6 cases?
Yeah, I think it will add fuel to the fire, but the principle of being transparent and using our vaccine adverse event system to actually slow down and look at this more carefully, I think is the more important rule here. Let's be honest, this vaccine has saved thousands of lives already. And 6 people that had serious side effects seems like not that important. Obviously, if you were those 6 people, it's very important. So I think if there's a signal in the system that there could be a problem, being transparent, putting it on pause, looking at it more carefully, I think it's the reasonable and ethically the right thing to do.
Does the state have any sort of ideas or estimates at this point about what percentage of the eligible population it believes will not be willing to get a vaccine?
Yeah, there are some estimates. I mean, there are some studies that are done with study groups to find, but I think the proof is in the pudding, quite honestly. I'm not even going to speculate what percent that is. I think we need to focus on making the vaccine available, making sure we're being transparent if there's problems, and to be clear that we can direct people to a reasonable and reputable source of information so they can answer these questions for themselves.
I want to end on one concern that I hear constantly from viewers. I don't know if it's so much as a concern or a frustration. This idea that even once they are fully vaccinated, they have to continue to wear their masks. Let's see, I got a viewer, Kevin. What's the point of getting a vaccine if we're still told we need to mask up and social distance and society is closed? He said it's totally pointless. What would you say to someone like Kevin who's frustrated that he can't be fully vaccinated and then, go on with his life?
Yeah, I mean, my point would be it's not just about you, okay? It's about the community. So you are getting vaccinated as part of the community. And when the majority of community is high enough so that this disease won't transmit, that is when we will loosen things like individuals wearing masks or otherwise. That number is probably around 70%.
Yeah, around 70%. So we have a little ways to go. Thank you to Dr. Scott Lindquist for helping us talk about vaccine hesitancy. And you can catch more of our interview, including a conversation about these so-called breakthrough cases that are happening. That's coming up tomorrow on the Divide podcast. All right, coming up after the break, we're switching gears to politics and looking ahead to what? 2022? Yes, as a challenger has stepped up to run against Senator Patty Murray. We'll hear from the Pasco Republican who believes she is better suited to help Washington families. Also coming up after the break, a conversation around policing in this country, and also we're going to talk a little bit about a subject we discussed last week, and that has to do with homeless camps at Seattle schools. Stick around. A 2022 matchup is forming in the race for United States Senate. We expect that longtime Democratic Senator Patty Murray will try to defend her seat, but she has her first serious challenger. A Republican from Pasco named Tiffany Smiley has launched her campaign, building on her experience advocating for her husband who was injured in Iraq.
From Scotty's experiences, Tiffany found her purpose: to fight for every veteran and make sure they receive the respect, dignity, and benefits they've earned. And she would take their fight all the way to the White House.
I spoke with Tiffany Smiley about her campaign and about the challenges ahead in running as a Republican in Washington state. This is a challenging time politically. It's a divisive time politically. How have you prepared yourself as a Republican running in Washington for some of those not so pleasant sides of politics?
Look, I'm here to work with people. If I've learned anything in my 16 years is that you're not going to do it alone. I'm about addition. I'm not about subtracting and dividing. because that does not move the needle forward. So I am here poised, ready to fight, ready to come together with families that want change. Career politicians are not in our future. It's not what is going to take us in the future. And if we look at, what all of us have experienced with the global pandemic, people are struggling. There's been a shift. And we're having to relook at our policies and how they directly affect people. And we need leaders, not politicians, to step up into that role.
You do know, and I'm sure you're told, it is very hard to win statewide office as a Republican, correct?
Yes, but I've never backed down from a fight. People told me, I'll never forget the doctor at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. He looked at me and he said, "Mrs. Smiley, I don't think you understand. Your husband has no eyes. He will never see again. There's never been someone to continue service to our country blind." And he pushed the paperwork in front of me and said, "Sign the paperwork." And I said, no. I was able to build a coalition and a team around me. I shared my idea. I thought Scotty should be the one to make that decision and be able to fully recover, to have all the resources and access that I believed he deserved. Built a team around me. They said, "We agree with you." And we were able to win that battle. So look, I want to talk to people. We have immense talent here in Washington State that can solve problems. If we come together and stop talking past each other and start working together to build a better future, it'll be amazing what we can accomplish here in Washington State.
One of the strategies of the Democratic Party in our state, which has been true for the last couple of years, is they really believe, and it is a strategy of theirs, it's very clear, they really believe that if they can tie Republican candidates to former President Donald Trump, that it is a death sentence for those candidates. Have you seen what the state Democratic Party put out? Have you seen their statement yet?
I have not, but someone did alert me to it.
Okay, well, let me read part of it to you. True to playbook, this is what they're trying to do with you. They said, in part, "The last person we need representing us is a Trump-supporting conservative who will put Mitch McConnell and extreme Republican leaders ahead of the people of Washington State." What is your response to that?
Look, I went and met with President Trump to fight for reform for all military families. It didn't matter if they were Democrat, Republican, Independent. I was fighting for all of them. So if you want to tie me to Trump for fighting for military families, go ahead. I would meet with anyone. I've met with Senator Patty Murray on caregiver reform. I met with Secretary Shulkin. I still talk to him today and work in his policy vet center. So if anything, it shows I can work together with others to get the mission done, to accomplish the greater good. Like I said, I'm about adding. I'm not about dividing and subtracting. So if they want to tie me to Trump for making a change for disabled veterans and their families, go ahead.
We might get back to the Trump subject in a moment, but you brought up Senator Patty Murray, and you two have worked together in the past. And I was curious about that because you had put out, a couple statements announcing your candidacy and suggested that the senator is failing Washington families and that she needs to be held accountable. But I mean, there are times in the not too distant past that you praised her. I was looking at two Facebook posts in particular, just from 2018. One of them is you standing next to a smiling Senator Murray. You said, "I had a wonderful meeting with Senator Murray. Her effort to support caregivers is truly remarkable." In another one around the same time frame, you posted a speech of hers and said, "I was honored to hear Senator Patty Murray use my story to advocate for VA caregivers, urged people to share her message." That doesn't sound to me like a politician you think is failing families. It sounds to me like a politician you think is helping families.
Look, I'll work with anyone that wants to improve the lives of caregivers in our country and our military families. I will promote that far and wide. And I think it shows the message of who I am, right? That it's about the greater good. It's not about internal partisan politics. That's not the future of our country. She's a career politician, and our country wasn't founded on that. In the military, it's one of the most trusted institutions in the world. And our generals and colonels don't sit in positions for 30 years. There's a reason for that. So she's been focused on the wrong Washington. She is failing our families here, propping up a failed healthcare, increased taxes and government overreach and spending. It's adding to the national debt, which is a national security issue for our families. That's going on our children's credit card bill. And I fight every day. I look at my boys and I want them to have a country in 5-10 years that is worth losing their eyesight for. So you better believe I will work with anyone to improve the lives of our military families, veterans, and caregivers.
We have both of our senators have been in their posts for a long period of time. Senator Patty Murray for longer than Maria Cantwell. But we hear from a lot of candidates who come in and say, you know, we need to get rid of career politicians. Are you making any sort of commitment as part of this race that you'll only serve so many terms if elected?
Hey, look, I will serve as long as the people vote me in. And I will be their representative, and I want them to hold me accountable. I will be their voice. I want to talk to them. And look, Patty Murray's in Washington, D.C. I'm here every day talking to families who are struggling, who are fighting homelessness, increased crime rates, drug addiction, poverty. These problems need solutions. And throwing money at them, throwing bureaucratic government programs at them that spends billions of our taxpayer dollars with little actual help going down to the people in need is not the solution for the future.
You know, you will have to be in D.C. quite a bit if you are a senator.
I'll go vote and I'll stand up. I will make Washington, D.C. work for all of Washington State. And you better believe when I get back in Washington State, I will be meeting with my people.
No one's a career politician until they keep getting elected and become a career politician. Great to have Tiffany Smiley on, though, you know, and she was born in Pasco, and I think, you know, more so we need some of those voices in politics that come from the other side of the Cascades, because, you know, sometimes it's hard to get the pulse on the differences between that side of the state and this side of the state. By the way, you can hear my unedited interview with Tiffany Smiley, hear a little bit more about her background and her story that led her into this race, coming up tomorrow on the Divide podcast. If you haven't downloaded it and subscribed to it already, why not? Lots of good stuff. We post new episodes every single Monday, so please make sure to do that. All right, I want to take a moment here to give you a quick update on a story we discussed on the show last week that was sort of like a rage factor story. Homeless camps near schools in Seattle. This one at Miller Park. This is a video we got a few days ago. It's directly next door to Meany Middle School on Seattle's Capitol Hill. So here's the thing. We know that kids are returning to class there tomorrow, and I got some good news for you. The tents are going to be gone. The tents are going to be gone from Miller Park when kids come back to school tomorrow. The city of Seattle taking action to clear the camp after offering outreach to those living there. Some accepted, we believe most accepted. Now, the city could do this because the camp technically is not on school grounds. The same is not true for another camp near a school in Seattle. I'll show it to you on a map. This one at Broadview Thompson K-12 in the Bitter Lake neighborhood. A homeless camp has been growing on school district property there, and the school board, which is in control of that property, has said publicly that it opposes sweeps. So people in the neighborhood are so mad. They've been taking these pictures. They did the red markings. That's not me, because they've been taking the pictures and then sending letters to the school district and the school board noting all the sort of safety and environmental hazards posed by the camp in their neighborhood. The folks behind the letter tell me that nothing is being done. They feel like no one is listening, and the situation is just getting worse. So for its part, I was in touch with the school district a little bit this week. The school is trying to, in the meantime, while they try to figure out what to do up there, getting creative to help keep kids safe. One of the ways they're trying to do that is by limiting students and staff and visitors to entering the school using only the door that's furthest away from the tents. So apparently that's sort of the workaround. What is stopping that exact same thing from happening at Broadview Thompson K-8?
So Broadview Thompson K-8, now we've been working with Seattle Public Schools, and I think the school board has been, you know, trying to grapple with how they address the encampments on their property. Some school board members were very clear they did not believe they should move anybody in those encampments. But it's their property. We're offering them their technical assistance. It's hard work. It's hard work for governments to do. You know, we do outreach. We offer people places to stay. That means getting the places and the services for them to stay. We offer people storage of property. We try to provide, once they're in the shelters, pathways to long-term housing. So, you know, I'm very hopeful that they find a way, that a path forward that they can both do what they want to accomplish and make sure that we can get that encampment off those school grounds.
Yeah, sorry, we jumped the gun on that one a little bit. That was Mayor Jenny Durkin. She and I discussed why isn't the same thing happening up at Broadview Thompson K-8 as you guys are doing at Miller Park. Obviously, the city doesn't have as much control over that situation, but is willing to sort of help the school district figure out what to do. I'm not sure that there's a lot of appetite from the school board to move any tents if people don't want to leave. So good news for kids up at Meany Middle School, not good news for kids up at Broadview Thompson and the neighborhood in there, but we're going to keep monitoring and pressing on this situation. All right, coming up after the break. Several deadly police shootings have the nation divided over the state of policing in this country. In my closing commentary, I want to encourage us to look realistically at these cases now and into the future. Stick around. There continues to be division in our country around policing. Things are particularly tense right now as the nation waits to hear what will happen in the murder trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, accused of killing George Floyd a year ago next month. And that tension has been exacerbated by other deadly shootings, like the shooting of 20-year-old Dante Wright in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, where an officer apparently meant to use her taser instead of her gun. She's now been charged with manslaughter. And then we saw a video released in the police shooting of 13-year-old Adam Toledo in Chicago, where the teen appeared to ditch a firearm and was shot just as he turned around and raised his empty hands in the air, all of it happening in a split second. I wrote something on this topic on Facebook that some of you didn't like. It was in response to the shooting of Mr. Wright in Brooklyn Center. I wrote, if you're not willing to acknowledge when an officer actually did something wrong, no one will listen to your arguments defending officers who didn't. You can blame Mr. Wright all you want, but that officer made a deadly mistake, and she knows it. My comments there were in response to so many of the reactions I see to police shootings. Reactions that seem to scrutinize every action someone took before being shot by police, but conveniently refuse to scrutinize any action taken by the officer. I'll give you a couple examples. This one about Adam Toledo. Poor child, if he had responsible parents, he would have been home at that time of the night and still be alive. Another one. Why is a 13-year-old out on the streets after 11 p.m.? This one about Dante Wright. Everything that happened is a result of him not complying. Another one. If he had followed orders, nothing would have happened. And look, let me be clear. There is nothing wrong with dissecting their behavior, as long as you're willing to look just as closely at the actions of the officers involved. You guys know by now how I approach stories on policing. I believe fundamentally that policing is a noble and necessary profession, but I also believe it is incredibly difficult, and that as a result of that, mistakes do happen. There are some people who refuse to acknowledge when an officer does something wrong. People who will defend officers under any circumstance, no matter how egregious it may be. And then you turn around and you complain that the other side's expectations are too high. Well, perhaps when you always act as if policing is perfect, then perfection is what the public starts to expect. And no matter what side of this issue you fall on, that is a standard that will never be consistent with reality. All right, thank you so much for joining us on The Divide. As always, we welcome and yes, we want your feedback. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter or send me an email, thedivide@fox.com. And don't forget to download and to subscribe to The Divide podcast. We post new episodes and extended interviews every single Monday after the show. I will see all of you tomorrow on Q13 News This Morning.